The other important thing, especially at this stage of the painting, where you're dealing mainly with background material, is to keep as much crisp statements in the painting as possible by making crisp brush strokes, keeping, sometimes I use a palette knife if I think a surface looks too clotted and uninteresting, to just open it up a little bit so that at all stages the painting has a certain look of possibilities, to fill in something too completely. Certainly in the beginning of the painting, like making too much of a final background statement closes down the painting, and it closes down the possibilities of what could be later on in the painting. So that, just as I started to say, using the palette knife a little bit so that you're opening up the texture, and having nice crisp statements with the paint, so that you always have possibilities of what to do with it. You don't want to close down possibilities, so that rather than thinking in terms of finishing it, which of course you will do, but that you can see different possibilities along the way of what you might or might not do with the painting. I think sometimes students get nervous about their painting and wanting to finish something, and they lose that quality of possibilities. It's like being on the edge sometimes can be psychologically difficult for some people, so that it's something you have to deal with, of keeping everything open and not rushing to the finish, so that you can enjoy the process of the painting rather than the result. Usually I covered the idea of how to hold a paintbrush and make brush strokes, which is the basis of painting. But since I've already done that on the first video that I made with Johnny and Ralph, The Art of Painting, I'm just going to skip over it for this painting, and you can buy the first one and find out that aspect of painting, which is, as I just said, the basis of all painting, is being able to make brush strokes. The second day's painting, some of the problems that people encounter and are concerned with is the fact that how do they work over a dry surface? Some people like to work wet and wet. They've determined that's the easiest way to do it. And so it becomes a problem for them. And of course, people who it doesn't make any difference working wet over a dry surface, they've adapted their way of working to that. I think the idea should be that painting is solving problems. And whether you're working over a dry surface or a wet surface, you're really trying to learn how to deal with problems rather than just having one solution that you're dependent on all the time, that you really should be loose and adaptable and learn to paint under any conditions, so that you, or that would engender a lot of self-confidence, or a lot of confidence that no matter what the situation is, you've learned to deal with it. The second day's painting, one of the problems in working the second day is more of the problem is getting into the painting where to start. And just like the first day where you do a lot of background material to get started, the second day you leave places. Of course, this is just started. I think we only worked about an hour and a half on this in actual time. But the idea, just like this being a loose kind of beginning to the painting, the second day you want to warm up and not start with anything super critical or critical till you've had a chance to absorb the painting, the ideas that you started initially with, the model posing. And so working in the background would really be a better way to start the second day's painting, so that you have a chance to let the right side of your brain take over, and rather than the verbal side, and start to see visually and get into the painting again. So, which is what I'll do now, is just try to mix up some color and just do some filler in the background. And that, of course, that would be another aspect of it, is getting back into the color family of the painting that you were working in. So it's kind of a recall business too. And what I thought I would do here is put in some kind of a cast shadow, approximately in this position, and then have some of the cloth drapery, coming down from that. So the other thing off camera, which I did, a couple of the colors form a skin on them, and so I had to break the skin and peel out the paint underneath to make them paintable again. So that's one of the things that the umbers dry very, very quickly, so that's always a bit of a problem the second day. I mean, not a problem, but something you have to work with. So we have this cast shadow coming from above. Sometimes there is the need to put medium on the first day if your painting dries matte, which gives you a false picture of the value, so that some colors such as ivory black naturally dry matte because of their oil absorbency. And when a color dries matte, you can't tell what its color actually is or its value, so you do have to oil out when that happens. So I would just put a little marigé on. And then here I would have a suggestion of this drapery coming down. Also, when you're working on your palette, try to paint the color on your palette rather than mix it, so that you're making, wherever possible, you're making brush strokes. You're making brush strokes on your palette, similar to the brush strokes you're making on your surface, so that your nervous system doesn't change. So that you're also getting a feeling of the consistency of the paint. And so I would continue all this shadow, so that there's a feeling of all this coming out of the dark here. And adding a little bit of ochre into the color to give it a vaguer quality. Just a little opaquing the shadows very slightly to make them a little more mysterious, taking away some of the richness and giving almost a glare quality to it. And that will continue to wherever this starts to come out into the light. So it's like focusing the attention here. To kind of restate what's happening, that so this starts to look like it's coming out into the light. Not being too specific about the drapery, just kind of getting a feeling of possibilities of what could happen. Another advantage of painting on your palette is you can use less paint by keeping the amount, mixing in a smaller space so it doesn't thin out, so you have more paint on your brush to pick up when you need it. Whereas Whereas if you just mash it all over the place, you lose some of the paint quality, the possibilities of the paint quality. So, just so I think now I would start to put some light on the figure and see what happens.
Does your white already have marigé in it?
The white I actually put linseed oil, some rather than the marigé. It's some washed linseed oil. So, but just to give it a slightly longer, some of these colors actually, I should have tried all of them to see. I thought they'd all stay wet. It's this Taos dryness. I actually thought these would. But the other colors have more or less marigé in them, depending on how they come out of the tube.
But not the linseed oil.
Yeah, the white I put just straight washed oil into it. So here, to try to get into the actual painting is to, well, first see what the value is, and using the ground as much as possible to change the value in the color of the paint like this. So starting slowly, coming out of the shadow, using the underneath to cool off the color, and then building it up to light so that you have a whole the whole concept of coming out of the dark right away into the light, and trying to get the feeling of the whole concept going rather than working just in and out of anatomy, to just get this whole flow of light coming through. You know, it gets darker. On the abdomen here, you know, so you're using the ground to help you change the value of the light, and brush pressure as well, you know, and then so that kind of thing. So that then it starts to get light again through here and building up. So trying to give a sense of the whole, the concept of it, without being too specific anatomically at this stage of the painting. A little more light here. And just get a little change here. If something like this. Think I could make this work? So. And then gradually working into the form itself, turning the edges by, again, just letting the ground do the work. And what's interesting is how the shadow, which looked relatively light and colorful before, all of a sudden looks much darker. So you have to adjust that. So this, just dragging the light into the shadow to give the form. Yeah. So you're using value to portray the topography. Then this trickles back. So we need a brush. So we have to lighten the value of the shadow. What should I use? Okay.
How do you determine your skin tone colors?
Well, what I try to do is take an assessment of what I'm seeing, from the model, and with all the surroundings, but essentially what color the model suggests to me, and divide it, or think of it in terms of yellow, red, or orange complexion if it's Caucasian. If it's Caucasian skin, those are your main divisions in terms of color. And then if it's red, you have to decide whether it's kind of a pinkish red, like an English red color, or whether it's more earthy color. So if it's more earthy, then I, of course would use the earth colors. If it's something finer, then I'd use a cadmium red light to get kind of what I would call an English or a northern complexion color. So those would be the main divisions in terms of complexion. But a redhead, of course, is more orange. more orange complected color-wise. And the problem is not so much the warm color as the cool color, the air color of the painting, so that the cool color is more important. You might say the cool color is more important than the warm color, in the sense that once you choose the warm color of the complexion, the cool color really helps get the actual look of the complexion. So if I took, as in this case, the Venetian red and the yellow ochre, if I used just a plain gray for the complexion color, you would get the look of one kind of complexion. If I used a greenish gray, it would give another a different look of the complexion. And a violet gray would give another look. So that the cool color really is important, and very important. So I shouldn't say most important, because they both work together, so that but it is a determinant factor rather than just the actual skin color in getting the look of the right complexion color. I'm also, of course, in this using, you can see, picking up some background color to where you want to have non-color, let this, make it look more airy. It's also the color of the highlight, and so I just want to. So where the form turns, you want to just get it a little bit cooler, so you get the feeling of turning here and also trickling into the light.